going to ignore that and just call him by his moniker, which is how everyone knows him, which is Sticks, Hex, and Hammer 666. Sticks, welcome back.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, we're here to talk about YouTube censorship once again. Now, basically across the board, and I talked about this just before the break, we got these leftist media establishments, these legacy media establishments. They've lost the argument. Their articles get completely decimated in comment sections, you know, if they even dare have comment sections at all. So instead of reevaluating these arguments to see why they're no longer resonating with people, they've decided instead to simply lobby for the censorship of opposing voices. We saw this with a fake news panic back at the end of 2016. That kind of got extinguished. They're now trying to bring it back. I talked about an article out of Salon where they're lobbying Facebook, Google, YouTube to censor, quote, fake news websites. You check the list of fake news websites. Oh, look, it's every conservative news website on the internet. What a coincidence that is, right? So we had this Wall Street Journal article last week. Now, they already attacked PewDiePie. They already attacked independent content creators. It was called, and we can flash this article up on screen, How YouTube Drives People to the Internet's Darkest Corners. Dun, dun, dun. So they frame it in this dark, kind of foreboding context. This is not the first time they've gone after independent YouTubers. Sticks, what was the purpose behind this latest Wall Street Journal hit piece? Break it down.
Well, this was apparently the same individual who also was writing about PewDiePie beforehand. He's going off to the New York Times. So these groups, they tend to share their talent, so-called. I thought it was funny, though, in reading it, it doesn't even really mention why, you know, you're fake news or I'm fake news or BP Earthwatch or anyone else. It just simply states that we are. I think that the hope generally is that the sort of people who take the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or whatever seriously, they're not going to look too deeply into it. They're not part of YouTube culture. They don't understand, you know, that there is independent analysis. They don't necessarily even care about that sort of thing because they've been taught that because somebody makes millions and millions of dollars wearing a suit and being on cable, that makes them trustworthy. Anybody else, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where they are. They automatically cannot be trusted. I would say that the anti-war front, therefore, is very much like anti-censorship movement. It's very much like independent commentary in general, the new rise of blood sports. And they're terrified because they're losing money. They're losing audience to people like you and I.
And they're really bad at YouTube. Let's face it. That's what it boils down to. It takes a lot of hard work to actually establish a beachhead on YouTube. It takes skill, it takes experience to know what kind of headlines to use, to know what kind of thumbnails to use, to know what content to talk about. They absolutely suck at it across the board. I mentioned just before the break, there was an MTV News video from like a couple of weeks ago. It had been up a couple of weeks. It had 200 views. I mean, for God's sake, I upload a video, I get 200 views in like 10 seconds. And that's why they hate us. I mean, there was a New York Times article last year where I joked, oh, YouTube is becoming a safe space for right-wingers. And that seems to be the point where they really started freaking out about it. Now we got this entire contrived moral panic. We had Mark Warner, a senator, again last week, calling for YouTube to change its algorithm because there were negative videos about Hillary Clinton. God forbid. Do you think, Sticks, that that's got anything to do with the fact that she was the most corrupt and unlikable presidential candidate in history? Or is it a big conspiracy that YouTube needs to fix?
Oh, it goes beyond just Hillary Clinton. It goes to the establishment at large. She's just one part of it, a big part, one of the worst, slimiest, most outdated, crazy parts, but it goes well beyond her. It's Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, it's the John McCains, and people within the Republican Party, too. And it's also, it's not just U.S., it's also people in foreign countries as well. Definitely it would go to the establishments that we see in Western Europe. Angela Merkel would probably be a number one on there. Maybe the Macrons and other individuals within France, within the UK, all over the world. We've got people who want us to die for their money, who don't want us to speak freely, and who, quite frankly, I think, lack the talent necessary to really make it in the online world, where it isn't just about having a cat teeth and a hair plug and a mega corporation, a multinational with billions of dollars behind you. It actually requires some degree of talent, some degree of originality. That's something that they never had to have. They haven't had that since the 1940s or 50s for the most part.
Well, yeah, it's harder to make a good YouTube video that resonates with people than it is to put out a snarky tweet as a verified liberal, which is what they seem to think is important. It's not really that important anymore. It's not really resonating with the younger generation. So, I mean, the old cliche, you know, get good, they don't seem to grasp that. So they want to artificially push everyone else down to lift themselves up, which is why we have now YouTube announcing, oh, we're going to put, you know, mainstream content at the top of search results on any hot breaking news topic. So they're starting to introduce this algorithm which punishes interesting people and rewards boring people like the people who work for the Wall Street Journal. Now, the CEO of News Corp came out last week, again, Robert Thompson, which, by the way, owns the Wall Street Journal, of course. He called on Google and Facebook to censor, quote, misinformation, that was his word, because in his own words, I'll read this quote to you, the potential returns for our journalism, get that again, the potential returns for our journalism would be far higher in a less chaotic, less debased digital environment. So, Sticks, does that sound like they genuinely want to eradicate misinformation, or does it sound like they want to make more money by eliminating their competition?
They only want to eliminate misinformation that goes against their misinformation. They want to be the only ones who are allowed to make propaganda and spread fake news. Ultimately, these groups, though, they've coalesced together to the point at which even some groups that are kind of conservative in form and function are working for the establishment. They're really part of the same group, and it's ultimately about attacking two groups of people: totally independent content creators and off-hook groups that are totally independent. They might be businesses, like InfoWars is a business, but it's independent. It doesn't take its marching orders from some group it's a multinational, multi-billion-dollar firm. Then you've got individuals who do their own independent analysis as well. Both of those are grave threats to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be attacking them. And the Wall Street Journal is one of the worst of all. It should get the award. When Donald Trump didn't give them the #1 award for fake news, it was almost a little bit of a letdown, to tell the truth.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, some of these social justice outfits tend to do actually quite well on Facebook in terms of views from what I've seen recently. But again, they're getting completely owned and decimated in the comments. This trend is really intensified from my perspective over the past 6 months, definitely, where you go on a viral video that's gone viral because it's absolutely incredibly stupid. Like, for example, there was a Vice show about a black girl, a black supremacist, basically saying white people shouldn't be able to, you know, have passports or travel because she's a racist, and Vice is giving her a platform because essentially they're a racist news outlet. You go on the YouTube, you go on the Facebook video, thumbs down to infinity, getting trashed in the comments. They're losing the argument, so they're having to censor alternative. And what is this stuff, Sticks? In the final minute of this segment, why are they censoring 1930s music? What's going on there?
Apparently they feel threatened by it, and it's branched out well beyond just political commentary. You'll look, Rotten Tomatoes, which is just entertainment, has nothing to do with politics. They're doing exactly the same thing. The little people don't have the right to speak unless they're speaking in a certain way. It's sort of like you have the right to vote. You have the right to vote Ja for Hitler or something along those lines. It's not even really that much of a surprise because it boils down to money, but it has become a problem. Ultimately, I think they fail in the long term. Short term, they have certainly the upper hand over people like us. We have less money.
All right, we're going to continue, Sticks, in the next segment. This is the Alex Jones Show Live, breaking news at Infowars.com. Going to go on to talk about how they're now censoring these prank videos. Again, another contrived moral panic over that will eventually be used to censor and punish other people. We'll talk about it after the break with Sticks, Hex and Hammer 666. Don't go away. We'll be back. We're back with Sticks, Hex and Hammer 666. We're talking about YouTube censorship. We're talking about fake news. You know, most people don't remember that back in December 2016, the Washington Post had to basically retract their list of fake news websites because it was based on a list compiled by this far-left biased organization, Prop or Not. It was not an impartial summary of fake news. And they've used this buzzword, they've used this post-truth world moniker ever since the election, again, because they're in a blind panic that they no longer have the power to control the narrative. In fact, there was a BuzzFeed article, Sticks, yesterday, and this was by Charlie Warzel, who's not a bad guy, but then he tried to mischaracterize what I said about it on Twitter. I invited him to come on the show and talk about it. And imagine my shock, no response whatsoever. But he talked to a senior government employee who's tasked with studying misinformation, who told him that, quote, they're expecting for the future a situation where misinformation is, quote, a direct threat to the foundations of our current civilization. Now, that doesn't sound hysterical at all. He's saying that information which disagrees with the prevailing establishment narrative is a threat to civilization. Do you think it's actually just a threat to their metropolitan, globalist, elite narrative control system? Is that maybe more likely the scenario we've got here?
Yeah, well, globalist misinformation is a threat to civilization. They're trying constantly to destroy liberty. They're trying constantly to destroy, anything that advances progress in the realm of human thinking. The idea maybe 20 or 30 years ago of this many people having this large an audience speaking instantaneously across the internet was it wasn't even in people's wildest dreams. They really are envious, I think, of the fact that individuals that really didn't have anything to begin with have capitalized upon that and sometimes have millions of fans. They want in, they want their slice of the pie, they want their money. And so if they can propagandize BuzzFeed, it would be hard to think of a group other than the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, a few of these groups, that's less honest than BuzzFeed. They get away with it only because they have their own audience. But I mean, honestly, their audience ultimately is small compared to like InfoWars. They've got a very small audience. It's very funny to see them complain because oftentimes these groups, they're in decline. They're not even growing. They're losing their fans. They're not really able to branch out onto YouTube. CNN's had problems, MTV News, all of these old juggernauts of the legacy media, they have problems really dealing with the tech era.
And a little bit rich of BuzzFeed to accuse me of fake news, given that they were behind the biggest fake news story of last year, the Trump P-Gate dossier, which other organizations who hated Trump didn't even run with because they knew it was phony. But that's what they're saying now. They're still on this jag about fake news. Oh, by the way, my YouTube channel, the past 11 videos have been demonetized. I think that's a new record for me personally. I'm going for 12 with this video, so we'll see if that happens. But we've seen another contrived moral panic sticks in terms of YouTube on top of the, extremist content panic, which is prank videos. We've had prank videos on YouTube for 10 years or more. People have been doing stupid things. Logan Paul's been an idiot for quite a while now. It's not a great revelation. That's been happening on YouTube basically since its inception. But now suddenly, sticks, prank videos are this huge societal problem, and YouTube has announced more measures to punish harmful content, they say, as a result. Tell us about that.
Yeah, they've all of this stuff's been on YouTube since day one. Bum fights, Tourette's guy. There were videos literally of people just swearing and doing crazy stuff like Jackass. We remember Jackass from the 1990s. It's really no different. It's no different than maybe Howard Stern when he was still being edgy. The difference is this time it's not being made by an individual or a show, a small group, a very centralized system. They're not the ones making the edgy content. Now the edgy content is being made by a million different individuals. Oh, well, it becomes a lot harder to stop it. That's ultimately why they're worried. It's the same moral argument for a different generation. It's the same boring individuals making that stupid argument. It's just that it's directed now at, literally a large proportion of the entire YouTube base. I can remember when I first got to YouTube, a lot of the viral content was really out there grindcore videos whose titles would make your toes curl. And that was a big thing at the time. Hundreds of thousands of people, which was a lot back then in 2007, would pile onto these videos to sort of be titillated by these weird titles and these weird images and this strange music that at the time was novel. Imagine if the same logic used today by the moralists was applied back in the 90s or the 2000s. They would be saying, you would have the left saying, no, we can't have Jackass, we can't have heavy metal, we can't have, this pop band is too out there, too risque for us, it's too cisnormative, and it would be terrible. I mean, we wouldn't have culture at all, there wouldn't be anything fun. No fun music, no fun videos, no fun independent content. If people want to maintain that, they've got to start fighting back against the censorship.
Everything is flipped. I mean, the left truly are the new Puritans, completely. If two people make a complaint about an advertisement or whatever in this country, it gets shut down, it gets banned. It's incredible how sensitive they are. final question, though, and we'll tell people how they can find your channel, is the common refrain. You know, YouTube's a private company. It can censor who it likes. How do you respond to that, Sticks?
Well, then a private company should be able to deny service of any kind to any person. That would cause so many problems. It wouldn't be pragmatic for our civilization. If they're pretending that they want to maintain Western civilization, maintain order, people should be nice and tolerant, well, then you've got to tolerate viewpoints that you find offensive. Most of those being censored or who are worried about being censored, ultimately, at the end of the day, they're not your enemy. They're not going to start a new Nazi party. They're not jackboots. They're not trying to crush skulls. They're simply trying to tell a bad joke or do something that's, funny to them, and it's kind of out there and crude. But that's been happening for a million years. And if you applied the same morality that's being applied to these sort of individuals today to something from 20 years ago, the same would be the case. It would ultimately be a fool's errand to try to police morality. In 10 years from now, the stuff that they're calling edgy probably won't be considered edgy.
So you don't think that we're at a point now where Google is such a monopoly that it needs some kind of regulation, that it needs to be incorporated in some kind of new Telecommunications Act, simply to protect freedom of speech, given that it's reached a point, it's grown so much, that Google basically is the internet for a lot of people at this point? You don't think we should go to that level of actual regulation?
I'm hesitant to say that. I think that something needs to be done. I prefer a constitutional amendment that doesn't just apply to Google or the big tech firms. It applies to all tech firms so that it's even-handed. It allows competition to continue. Failing that, though, at least temporarily, you're right, we may have no other choice but to relegate Google and some of these other big firms. Facebook probably not, because it's dying anyway, and a couple of years from now, no one will care who Zuckerberg is. He'll be like homeless. Other than that, though, Twitter and YouTube certainly is the big ones. They might need to be relegated to public utility status.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Just tell people how they can find your channel and when they can find you on Twitter.
They can look up Sticks666 Official on Twitter or on Gab, Sticks Hexenhammer on Minds.com, and of course Sticks Hexenhammer 666 on YouTube, as well as many other sites.
I'll be sure to include those links in the description below when this goes up on YouTube. Sticks, thanks for joining us. Pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
There he goes, one of my favorite YouTube commentators, Sticks Hexenhammer 666.